At the very top of the world, where the compass trembles and the night seems endless, there is a silence so vast it almost hums. It's the kind of silence that feels alive, like the Earth itself is holding its breath beneath the weight of endless ice. We've sent machines to the edges of the solar system. We've looked into the birthplaces of galaxies billions of light years away. Yet here, at the crown of our own planet, there remains a world we cannot touch, a surface we cannot breach, a mystery that keeps its pulse beneath our feet. The paradox is simple and unbearable. We know more about distant worlds than we do about the one that lies just below the Arctic ice. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I'm doing here. And if you're listening now, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Maybe you're warm somewhere far away from the frost. Or maybe the night outside your window carries its own small echo of this frozen place. Either way, what you are about to hear belongs to the silence of the North. The North Pole is not a place of landmarks. There are no mountains to climb, no valleys to wander, no borders to cross. It's a shifting mosaic of ice and wind, floating on a restless ocean that never stands still. To most of us, it's a blank spot on the map, a place so remote that even our satellites hesitate, their orbits bending awkwardly around its magnetic pull. But beneath that surface, under the coldest winds and the brightest snow, lies a landscape older than humanity, sealed off for millions of years. What exists there is not merely frozen water. It is a living, moving labyrinth, a body of ice that creeps and folds and reshapes itself, swallowing rivers, mountains, even time itself. And inside that labyrinth may be something even stranger. Entire ecosystems sealed in absolute darkness, never touched by light, untouched by us. To reach that world, you would have to descend through layers of history compacted into ice. Each meter you travel downward is a step back in time. Snow that fell when mammoths still roamed Siberia, when the seas were lower, when the Earth tilted differently toward the sun. These layers are not just frozen water. They're memories, compressed into silence. Scientists can read them like pages of a book. Changes in temperature, traces of volcanic ash, whispers of ancient atmospheres. But even those pages end. Beneath a few kilometers of pressure, the story stops, because the weight of the ice changes the very rules of matter. Down there, water doesn't behave as water should. It melts where it should freeze, flows where it should rest, and hides in darkness so complete that light itself cannot pass. We have tried to look beneath. Satellites have scanned the surface, bouncing radar off invisible seams in the ice. Submarines have crossed below the sea ice but never beneath the glaciers themselves. Every attempt to dig, to peer, to measure ends in silence. Equipment fails. Signals fade. Boreholes close. The Arctic resists intrusion as if by instinct. It swallows our instruments and erases the evidence of our presence. In a way, it feels alive, an organism defending its most secret organs. Even the data we have is fragmentary, riddled with blanks. The maps of the Arctic seabed, our supposed triumphs of technology, are still incomplete, filled with gaps labeled simply, "No data." If you could stand there, at the precise point of the geographic North Pole, you would not be standing on land. You would be standing on sea ice, a skin of frozen ocean, constantly shifting under your boots. Beneath it is water, black and frigid, and beneath that, the hidden floor of the Arctic Ocean, carved by ridges and trenches that no one has truly seen. The ice above can be several meters thick, sometimes tens of meters. ridged and folded like a landscape of frozen waves. Beneath that ice, the pressure rises with every meter until the water itself becomes heavy enough to bend steel. Down there, even sound changes shape. It travels slower, as if weighed down by the cold. Everything happens in slow motion. The flow of water, the drift of sediments, the life cycle of microorganisms that might still linger in the black. We call it the last frontier, not because it is far, but because it is resistant. Human exploration depends on contrast, on light to see, air to breathe, gravity to stand against. The Arctic offers none of these. It blinds, it freezes, it floats. And in that weightless cold, our instruments lose meaning. Temperature sensors fail to measure. Radio signals scatter. Metal becomes brittle. Batteries die without warning. Even our language falters. Words like land, sea, and sky start to dissolve when everything is one continuous expanse of white and gray. What makes this place even more mysterious is that it's not fixed. The ice at the North Pole drifts several kilometers every day. The exact location of the top of the world changes hour by hour, carried by the invisible breath of ocean currents. The place you stand now may be hundreds of meters away from where you stood an hour ago, though everything around you looks the same. Beneath that drifting skin, however, lies permanence, a pressure so constant it warps the Earth's crust. Under the glaciers of Greenland and the polar basin, that weight pushes the ground downward, creating vast bowls where water collects and stays trapped for millennia. These are the places scientists long to reach, because inside them might be life that has evolved apart from sunlight, sealed in an ecosystem as old as the ice itself. And yet, for all our ambition, something holds us back. It's not just distance or cold. It's the nature of the ice itself, its restlessness, its defiance, its refusal to be known. When explorers from centuries past tried to map these regions, they found their compasses spinning, their instruments confused by magnetic distortion. When modern scientists send probes or drills, they find the ice alive, shifting, bending, crushing their efforts into silence. The Arctic behaves not like a location, but like a mind, one that forgets, erases, and conceals as fast as we try to remember. To look beneath it is to confront the limits of our control. We have always assumed that exploration is a matter of willpower, that with enough technology and persistence, we can conquer anything. But here, at the edge of the world, the Earth reminds us otherwise. The ice listens. It waits. And every time we try to pierce its surface, it answers in the same quiet voice. Not yet. The deeper truth is that this frozen gate may not be guarding a treasure at all. It might be guarding the concept of mystery itself, the last true barrier between what we can measure and what we must imagine. Perhaps that's why every generation returns here, sending ships, satellites, and dreams into the cold, trying to catch a glimpse of what cannot be reached. The Arctic isn't just geography, it's a mirror, one that reflects our own restlessness, our hunger to know what lies beyond the edge of understanding. And maybe, just maybe, it's that hunger that keeps the ice from yielding. Somewhere beneath that mirror of white, under the crushing silence and the drifting flows, there is another world. A place where rivers run in the dark, where water forgets the sun, and where time itself may have slowed to the pace of ice. We do not yet know what waits there, only that it endures. And as the world warms, as satellites circle and oceans rise, the secret grows thinner, closer, but never quite within reach. So, when you close your eyes tonight and imagine the top of the world, try not to picture a flag or a pole, but a gate made of frozen breath. A gate that opens only in dreams, leading downward into the unseen heart of our planet, where silence moves and light dies, and everything we've ever wanted to know waits just beneath the ice. The further north you travel, the more the world begins to dissolve into simplicity. Color disappears first. Greens fade to grays, then to white. Sound follows next, the murmur of wind swallowing everything else. Even time loses precision, replaced by a long, unbroken twilight that never feels entirely like day or night. And yet, in that apparent emptiness, something immense is happening. Beneath every frozen horizon, every drifting floe, every brittle ridge of snow, there is a kingdom in motion. Not a static wasteland, but a slow, breathing body of ice that has been alive far longer than our species has walked the earth. A glacier is not dead. It only moves too slowly for us to notice. Each one begins as nothing more than snow. Tiny, weightless flakes that drift from clouds and fall in silence. They accumulate layer upon layer, season after season, year after year, until the weight of the new snow begins to crush the old. Under pressure, those fragile crystals transform, compressing into dense ice that traps air from ancient atmospheres, sealing away the breath of past ages. Over centuries, that ice thickens until it begins to deform under its own colossal mass. It creeps downward, flowing outward like a viscous river of glass. This is what a glacier truly is. A river of frozen time, grinding mountains into powder, carving valleys deep enough to hold seas, sculpting the planet with the patience of eternity. The Arctic's glaciers are among the oldest still alive. Some began forming over 2 million years ago, long before humans appeared to give names to the cold. In their depths, layers of ancient snow have fused into strata older than civilization, older even than the continents as we know them. The Greenland ice sheet alone covers more than 1.7 million square kilometers. Its weight so vast that it pushes the Earth's crust downward by hundreds of meters. Imagine that. The land itself bending beneath the patience of ice. It is not merely a covering, it is architecture. It builds landscapes as slowly as tectonic plates, and with equal authority. What lies beneath this immense weight is not stillness, but transformation. The pressure at the base of the ice is so intense that it crushes rock, melts water, and reshapes entire valleys. It forges hidden rivers that flow in perfect darkness, their paths mapped not by sunlight, but by gravity and the quiet pulse of the Earth's heat. It creates caverns where liquid water pools, sealed away for hundreds of thousands of years, forming what scientists call subglacial lakes. No wind touches them. No rain disturbs them. They exist in a kind of absolute isolation, ecosystems apart from everything we know. To reach them is to cross into a form of time that does not belong to us, time that has forgotten the sun. But even as the glaciers grind and flow, they breathe in their own way. Every fracture and crevasse acts as a lung, exhaling the slow sigh of shifting pressure. Listen closely, and you might hear the deep groans of the ice, the quiet thunder of movement beneath stillness. It's the language of a kingdom whose vocabulary is measured in centuries. Compression, expansion, collapse, renewal. The Arctic may appear frozen, but beneath that illusion of permanence, it moves with a rhythm so steady and so vast that no human clock could ever measure it. From above, satellites see only white, but instruments that can peer through the surface, radar, gravimeters, seismic sensors, reveal something astonishing. Beneath the Arctic's ice sheet lies a landscape more dramatic than any mountain range on the surface. Deep troughs, hidden ridges, submerged valleys larger than the Grand Canyon. One of them, the Greenland Canyon, stretches for over 700 kilometers beneath the ice. Its floor cut by ancient rivers that once flowed freely before the glaciers entombed them. In a sense, the Arctic holds a fossil of an entire lost world. A geography buried not by catastrophe, but by time's slow accumulation. And like all fossils, it waits to be understood, but not easily revealed. The problem is that ice, unlike stone, refuses to stay still. It flows like liquid, deforming every structure that touches it. If you could place your hand on the surface of a glacier and return in 1,000 years, you'd find that your handprint had migrated, distorted, dissolved. The ice moves outward from its center in all directions, always seeking equilibrium, always reshaping the world below. Even the mountains that support it cannot remain unchanged. Their peaks are eroded grain by grain, carried away in streams of subglacial meltwater that eventually reach the sea. In this sense, the glacier is not a monument to endurance, but to motion, an empire that rules by erasure. And yet, within that erasure lies creation. The fjords of Norway, the carved valleys of Alaska, the plains of Canada. All were shaped by ice that once moved as the Arctic glaciers do now. The slow grinding of rock beneath pressure releases minerals into meltwater, feeding ocean life thousands of kilometers away. The very currents that regulate our planet's climate begin in the Arctic, driven by the balance between freezing and melting, between density and flow. Every gust of wind that crosses the hemisphere carries a trace of that hidden kingdom's breath. To understand it is not just to understand the Arctic, but to glimpse the pulse of the Earth itself. But how do you study something that moves at the speed of eternity? Scientists try year after year, lowering sensors into boreholes, mapping the shifting density of ice, listening to the tremors of its inner structure. Some of those sensors never return. The ice closes over them, reclaiming what it was asked to reveal. Others send back data that is almost poetic in its incompleteness. Vibrations that sound like distant thunder, spikes of pressure that rise and fall like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. We can measure its movement, but not its meaning. The more we observe, the more the glacier behaves like a living mystery, aware of our questions, but answering only in riddles. Even its edges resist us. Ships attempting to navigate the northern passages find themselves surrounded by ice that forms and breaks unpredictably. Massive sheets calve from glaciers without warning, sending echoes that travel for miles. Each collapse reveals a hidden blue interior, water frozen in impossible clarity, ancient as the stars. Inside that blue lies every secret of the Arctic, the air of prehistoric forests, the dust of extinct volcanoes, the trace of meteors that fell when our ancestors were still afraid of fire. To touch that ice is to touch the history of everything that has ever melted into the sea. We like to imagine the Arctic as fragile, something we might destroy through carelessness or greed. But there is another truth, quieter and harder to face. The Arctic is not fragile. It is mercilessly patient. It endures by changing. It waits by erasing. Its strength lies not in resistance but in indifference. Long after our ships rust and our satellites decay, the ice will continue its slow migration toward the sea, its buried rivers carving new paths in the dark. And somewhere deep within that hidden kingdom, where sunlight has never reached, the weight of all those winters will press on, folding time, crushing rock, and sealing its secrets a little tighter. Perhaps that is what the Arctic has always been, a keeper of balance, a world that absorbs our curiosity but never surrenders its essence, We peer into its heart hoping to find a reflection of ourselves, the ambition, the resilience, the will to survive. And instead, we find the opposite. Silence, pressure, surrender. It teaches not through revelation, but through refusal. And that refusal feels strangely sacred, because beneath those shifting towers of ice, in the deep blue where water forgets its own name, the planet still dreams. Slow, cold, and eternal. If you listen long enough, you can almost hear it. A faint, unbroken hum beneath the world's heartbeat. The song of ice that does not stop, that carries the memory of all things frozen and all things lost. It is the sound of a kingdom that we will never rule, but that has ruled us since the first wind carried snow across stone. The hidden kingdom of ice. If you were to stand at the center of the Arctic night and press your hand against the ice, you might imagine it to be fragile. Something that cracks, that melts, that gives way under heat. But beneath that smooth surface lies a force beyond measure. Every meter of snow that has fallen, every flake that has settled and refused to melt, has become part of a weight that presses down upon the world with silent persistence. It is a kind of patience that humans can't comprehend. Not rage, not destruction, but a stillness so powerful it bends stone, alters gravity, and reshapes continents. The glaciers of the north are not resting, they are pressing. Their weight is the Earth's oldest law, and everything beneath them must obey. Each layer of snow, once light enough to drift on wind, grows heavier under the seasons that follow. The air between crystals collapses, the spaces narrow, and the snow becomes firn. A grainy, compact substance halfway between light and solid. Over centuries, the firn fuses into ice. Trapped within are tiny bubbles of air, fragments of atmosphere from ages that no longer exist. A breath of mammoth winters, sealed under new storms, buried under new centuries. The deeper you go, the older the air becomes, until the oxygen itself feels prehistoric. These layers accumulate without pause, and their combined weight builds pressure. Billions of tons of frozen memory pressing downward. At a depth of just 10 meters, the pressure already equals 1 atmosphere. 1,000 meters below, it multiplies 100-fold. Beneath the Greenland ice sheet, where the ice can exceed 3 kilometers in thickness, the pressure surpasses 400 atmospheres, enough to crush submarines, to bend steel into ribbons. But the ice is not crushed. It flows. It absorbs that pressure, redistributing it outward, downward, endlessly. This is why glaciers move, why they slide across bedrock like slow rivers. Ice under pressure behaves neither like a solid nor a liquid. It yields without breaking, deforming molecule by molecule, slipping over itself with a patience that rewrites the land. That same pressure changes the very laws of water. Ordinarily, we think of melting as a matter of warmth, but under immense weight, the rules invert. Water's freezing point drops as pressure increases, meaning that at the glacier's base, ice can melt even when the temperature remains below zero. This paradox creates a thin, secret world between ice and rock, a film of liquid that never freezes, feeding networks of hidden rivers and lakes. The Arctic's veins. They flow in total darkness, unseen and unmapped, carrying meltwater that has never touched the air. Some of these channels run for hundreds of kilometers, lubricating the glacier's motion, shaping the landscape beneath it, and perhaps sustaining forms of microbial life, adapted to an eternity of silence. Pressure is not uniform, it's alive. It builds, shifts, releases. When glaciers advance, they press down so hard that they deform the crust itself. The ground sinks by hundreds of meters, like a slow breath drawn in by the earth. When they retreat, the land rises again. A process called isostatic rebound. Even now, thousands of years after the last ice age, parts of Canada and Scandinavia are still rising millimeter by millimeter, exhaling from the weight they once bore. The Arctic, too, is breathing in this long rhythm, its crust bending and straightening under the pulse of ice. To witness it is to see time in motion, not the time of clocks, but the time of mountains, of continents. Beneath all that pressure, water and rock behave like memory. The weight above crushes stone into powder, grinding mountains into fine sediments that settle in secret basins beneath the ice. Those sediments preserve a geological diary, a record of eruptions, earthquakes, and ancient climates. But they also hold something deeper, evidence of the Earth's own fragility. For even the planet itself bends beneath the burden of its frozen crown. The Greenland ice sheet alone contains enough mass to alter the planet's gravitational field. When its weight shifts, sea levels around the world respond like water in a tilted glass. The Arctic, though remote, holds the balance of all coasts in its invisible hands. If you could listen to that pressure, really listen, you might hear more than creaks or groans. You'd hear a slow heartbeat, the pulse of geological time. Each pulse is a rearrangement of the world below. Crust compresses, faults awaken, ancient groundwater is squeezed into motion. Some scientists believe that as glaciers thin, their loss of weight can even trigger small earthquakes or volcanic activity, as if the Earth, relieved of its burden, twitches awake. The Arctic does not sleep lightly, and yet, for all this power, the weight of the ice is not cruel. It does not destroy in anger. It transforms through patience. Every glacier is a sculptor. As it moves, it scrapes valleys into smoothness, crushes mountains into plains, and deposits its sediments at the sea's edge, where new life eventually grows. The Arctic's pressure is a paradox. The same force that buries also creates. It hides rivers while giving birth to oceans. It erases landscapes while shaping others. In its cold stillness, it behaves more like an artist than an oppressor, carving meaning into the bones of the earth. For those who try to explore it, this weight is both physical and philosophical. To study the Arctic is to confront limits, not just of machinery, but of human scale itself. Drills bend, sensors fail, satellites lose signal. But the deeper limitation lies in our imagination. We are creatures of light, adapted to movement and air. To comprehend a world defined by pressure, darkness, and near absolute stillness requires us to think beyond survival. Down there, beneath 3 kilometers of ice, time slows, light ceases, sound stretches. Even gravity feels altered, distorted by density and cold. It is not a place meant for life as we know it. It is a realm that belongs to weight, to silence, to the physics of endurance. The few glimpses we have managed to gain, through seismic echoes or radar reflections, suggest landscapes so alien they might as well belong to another planet. Deep trenches shaped by invisible rivers, caverns where meltwater gathers and freezes again in cycles that last thousands of years. Pockets of liquid under so much pressure that a single puncture could unleash torrents capable of reshaping the ice above. And always, beneath it all, the same paradox. Motion within stillness, change within permanence. Sometimes I think of that weight not only as a force of nature, but as a kind of mirror. It reflects our own restlessness. Humanity, for all its noise and invention, is light, temporary, fast, fragile. We move quickly, but we don't endure. The ice does the opposite. It moves slowly, but it lasts. It teaches that true strength lies in stillness, that silence can be the loudest voice on earth. Maybe that's why the Arctic humbles us, because it reminds us that not all power is kinetic. Some of it simply waits, and so, while satellites orbit and theories accumulate, the weight of the North endures. Every flake that falls adds its fraction of a gram. Every winter presses the world a little deeper into itself. It is the weight of a million winters, the pressure of memory, the density of time. It bends continents, drowns valleys, and keeps the secrets of what lies beneath sealed under unbroken darkness. One day, perhaps, that weight will shift again. The ice will melt, the land will rise, the rivers beneath will wake and rush toward the sea. But even then, the pressure will not disappear. It will merely change form. For in every drop of Arctic water, there is history condensed, the memory of silence, of endurance, of things that yield but never truly vanish. And if you listen, really listen, to the stillness between the winds, you might feel it pressing down even now, not as a burden, but as a reminder that the Earth, like us, carries its past wherever it goes. Beneath the Arctic skin of ice lies a darkness older than language. It is not the kind of night that begins with sunset or ends with dawn, but a darkness that has lasted for entire epochs, unbroken, absolute. It is a space that has never seen sunlight, not even once. No reflection, no flicker, no shadow. Light cannot survive here. It is swallowed molecule by the ice above, scattered and absorbed until nothing remains but blackness so complete it erases the very idea of distance. There is no near or far. There is only cold and weight and time. And within that silence, the planet hides one of its deepest mysteries. A world that endures not by changing, but by refusing to be seen. When we think of darkness, we imagine something empty. But this darkness is full of pressure, of ancient water, of forms and sounds too slow for the human ear to detect. Even silence here has a texture. The ice groans softly under its own weight, shifting by millimeters, rearranging its crystals with the patience of gravity. Sometimes a fracture opens miles below the surface, releasing a low, resonant sound, not like thunder, but like a whisper through stone. Scientists call it a cryoseism, the ice's version of breath. It can travel for kilometers through solid matter, a ghostly vibration that fades and returns. The glacier's slow heartbeat. In this deep and airless world, there is no up or down, only gradients of cold. At a few hundred meters, the light from the surface still glows faintly blue, like the afterimage of memory. But descend deeper, 1,000 meters, 2,000, and even that vanishes. Here, the darkness becomes total. Pressure multiplies, temperature drops, and the ice thickens into opaque layers filled with trapped sediments and bubbles of air so ancient they predate the human species. Inside each bubble is a whisper from an atmosphere that has long since changed. To look at that air under a microscope is to see a ghost of the world before memory began. Our machines fail easily here. Cameras see nothing but static. Lights reflect back in white fog and vanish after a few meters. Radio waves scatter. Even sonar, the instrument of the blind, returns only fragments, distorted echoes that twist in strange directions. Communication becomes impossible. Signals die before they reach the surface. It is as if the ice itself absorbs our attempts at knowing. Every expedition beneath the glaciers eventually faces this truth. You cannot illuminate darkness that does not want to be lit. And yet, within this eternal night, there may be life. Tiny, patient, unseen. Microbes that have adapted to cold, pressure, and starvation over hundreds of thousands of years. They do not need sunlight. They do not photosynthesize. Instead, they live off chemical energy, the slow reactions between minerals and water, the faint geothermal warmth that seeps upward from the crust. They metabolize iron, sulfur, hydrogen, or ammonia, building entire invisible ecosystems from the chemistry of stone. These are not hypothetical. We have found them in Antarctica, in Lake Vostok and Lake Whillans, sealed under 4 kilometers of ice. They thrive where no sunlight has ever touched, proving that life does not need light to endure. Only energy, water, and time. If similar life exists beneath the Arctic, it may have persisted since before the first human looked north. It would have evolved in solitude, adapting to an environment that changes not over decades, but over millennia. Imagine a world where day and night do not exist, where the only rhythm is the slow flow of meltwater, where each generation of microbes lives and dies in the dark without ever knowing light was possible. It is a kind of life so alien, it might tell us more about distant worlds, Europa, Enceladus, Titan, than about our own. For if life can persist here, beneath the North Pole's glaciers, sealed away from sunlight for millions of years, then life elsewhere in the universe suddenly seems inevitable. But the darkness is not only biological, it is psychological. Humans are creatures of light. Our eyes, our minds, even our moods are built around its cycle. When we are deprived of it, the body loses its rhythm. Days blur into nights. Thoughts slow. For explorers who have worked through Arctic winters, the absence of light is more than discomfort. It is a quiet undoing of self. You begin to feel as if the world has forgotten you. The silence grows louder. The body feels smaller, and time dissolves into something without edges. To imagine being beneath kilometers of ice, surrounded by nothing but blackness and the sound of your own pulse, is to imagine the closest thing to non-existence that still includes breath. Machines feel it too. The cold saps power, shortens batteries, stiffens cables, metal contracts and fractures, lubricants freeze. Even the simple act of transmitting a signal, light, heat, vibration, becomes an act of resistance against the medium itself. The Arctic doesn't destroy quickly. It exhausts slowly. It waits, indifferent, until our endurance fails first. And yet, the darkness remains strangely beautiful. There's a purity to it, an honesty we rarely encounter. On the surface, everything changes constantly. Weather, sound, light, color. Beneath, nothing changes, and everything does. The darkness holds still while the ice above shifts endlessly. It is both motion and pause, creation and preservation. Within that paradox, the planet keeps its oldest memories intact. The sediments at the bottom of subglacial lakes record histories older than human language, cycles of climate, layers of volcanic dust, fragments of pollen from vanished forests. They lie undisturbed, protected by the weight of ice and the absence of time. For all our satellites and sensors, we have never truly seen them. The darkness guards its archives. Scientists who study the Arctic call it the cryosphere, the frozen part of the Earth's system. But there is something more poetic at play, something almost spiritual. The cryosphere is not just a region of cold. It is a form of consciousness written in temperature and pressure. Every crack, every shift, every whisper of melting is a kind of thought. The planet remembering and forgetting itself through the language of ice. When we stand above it and look into the blue shadows of crevasses, we are not just seeing frozen water. We are seeing time solidified. The darkness beneath the glaciers is therefore not a void. It is the Earth's subconscious, a place where memory, pressure, and chemistry blend into something that feels almost sentient. Perhaps that is why it resists us. To enter it would be like trying to open the mind of the planet itself. And some doors were never meant to be opened, and still, we dream of it. We build machines to descend, lights to pierce, algorithms to interpret the echoes that bounce back from beneath the ice. We can't help ourselves. The darkness calls to us precisely because it refuses to answer. It holds the same allure as the night sky. Infinite, silent, unknowable. And maybe that's the point. The universe above and the universe below mirror each other. One a void of space, the other a void of ice. Both ancient, both filled with invisible motion. Both reminders that we live between two infinities. One we look up to, and one we stand upon. If you listen closely to recordings made deep within the glaciers, you'll hear something haunting. Low-frequency vibrations that oscillate like a voice too large for language. Some call it icequake resonance. Others think of it as the sound of pressure adjusting itself. But if you let the sound play long enough, it starts to resemble breathing. An endless exhale. A slow, heavy inhale. The Earth itself, dreaming beneath its frozen skin. Perhaps that's why the darkness endures. Because it isn't a place at all, but a process. A way of existing that we've forgotten. It teaches stillness, patience, humility. It reminds us that not all things are meant to be illuminated. Some truths live better in shadow, where they can exist without interference. The Arctic's darkness is one of those truths. It asks nothing of us but respect and silence. One day, perhaps, light will find its way there. A robot will descend, a lens will focus, and for a brief instant, the ancient dark will be undone. But until that moment, this darkness remains what it has always been. The last pure place on Earth, untouched by time, unbroken by light, and endlessly patient. A darkness that endures. Beneath the Arctic ice, far below the cold silence where light has never reached, there are whispers of moving water. They are not oceans as we know them, not the restless blue plains that churn under the sun, but ancient, self-contained worlds of liquid trapped beneath the glaciers. They flow through black tunnels and gather in immense basins, sealed away for thousands, even millions of years. Scientists call them subglacial lakes, but the name feels too small, too civilized. These are not lakes. They are hidden oceans, entire systems that exist in total isolation, untouched by the surface world. Perhaps since long before we learned to name anything at all. The first time we realized such places could exist was by accident. In the early 1990s, satellites scanning Antarctica noticed faint, rhythmic rises and falls in the ice sheet's surface. Tiny pulses, only a few centimeters, repeating over months and years. At first, scientists thought it was an error, a trick of the radar. But then they realized the truth. Something liquid was moving beneath kilometers of ice, filling and draining vast cavities. One of them, Lake Vostok, was later mapped to be as large as Lake Ontario, buried under nearly 4 kilometers of frozen pressure. That discovery changed everything. It revealed that even in the most lifeless corners of Earth, water still flows. Life might still stir. And the planet's interior is not dead, but quietly alive. If such vast hidden oceans exist in Antarctica, what might lie beneath the Arctic? The other pole, equally ancient, equally sealed. The geography is different. The North Pole is an ocean covered by ice, not a continent buried beneath it. Yet surrounding it are colossal glaciers. Greenland, Svalbard, Ellesmere, each with its own secret network of meltwater and sediment. Beneath them, radar studies have hinted at cavities that behave like the subglacial lakes of the south, but smaller, less stable, harder to detect. These pockets of water shift and breathe with the seasons, expanding in the summer when surface melt seeps downward, shrinking in the winter as temperatures lock the system again. Some may drain suddenly, unleashing torrents beneath the ice that no one ever sees, rivers that exist for days or weeks and then disappear as if nothing happened. Others persist for centuries, quietly evolving in darkness, becoming small worlds unto themselves. To imagine what they might look like is to step outside the boundaries of human experience. Picture a cathedral made not of stone but of pressure and cold, a cavern sealed by a roof of ice thicker than mountains, where the water glows faintly from the reflection of the minerals and trapped gases. The temperature hovers just below freezing, yet the water remains liquid, held in that state by the immense weight above it. In that water float sediments, powdered rock, grains of silt, traces of the ancient earth, drifting slowly like dust in a room where time has stopped. The walls of the cavern may be smooth in places, jagged in others, shaped by the constant flow of meltwater and the grinding of the glacier above. In some corners, crystals form and collapse over millennia. In others, geothermal heat seeps up from the crust, warming the base just enough to keep the lake alive. It is here, in this twilight between ice and stone, that some scientists believe life could exist. Not the kind of life that breathes or swims, but microbial, molecular, elemental. Life that survives without sunlight, feeding on minerals, surviving on chemical energy alone. Chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis. We have seen it happen before, at the ocean's hydrothermal vents, in the brine pockets beneath Antarctic ice, in deep mine shafts kilometers underground. Bacteria and archaea thriving where they shouldn't, proving that biology is not fragile, but defiant. If life can exist there, it could exist here too, in these hidden Arctic waters, sealed from the world above for longer than human history. But these hidden oceans are not static. They live and move according to rules we barely understand. The pressure changes, and a lake drains. The glacier shifts, and a new cavity opens. Sometimes the movement is sudden, cataclysmic. Glaciologists call these events Jukkelhlaups, glacial outburst floods. A single one can release billions of liters of water in hours, carving new valleys beneath the ice, reshaping the land, even lifting the glacier itself like a raft. To us, it is invisible, happening in total secrecy beneath kilometers of ice. Yet these unseen floods have changed coastlines, altered rivers, and echoed through climate records like heartbeats. The earth moves from below, and the ice records every pulse. There is another kind of mystery hidden in these waters, one of memory. The sediments that settle at the bottom of subglacial lakes are layered archives of the past. They contain chemical traces of old atmospheres, dust from volcanic eruptions, remnants of cosmic particles that once drifted through the stratosphere. They may hold pollen from extinct forests, the DNA of vanished life, even clues to how the planet's climate has shifted through its long, cold breathing cycles. But to reach them, to study them without destroying what makes them pure, is nearly impossible. Drilling into these lakes risks contamination. One drop of modern bacteria, one leak of drilling fluid, and the ancient equilibrium could be lost forever. It is like performing surgery on a body that has never been touched, using tools that cannot withstand the environment they are meant to enter. And so, for now, we imagine. We build models. We run simulations. We send sound waves through the ice and read the echoes like oracles. Some say the subglacial lakes of the Arctic may connect to one another through unseen channels, forming entire underground networks. Rivers that have flowed since the last ice age, joining lake to lake in a dark, hidden ocean. Others think they exist as isolated pockets, self-contained and silent, each one a world unto itself. Both may be true. The Arctic rarely answers in absolutes. It seems to prefer ambiguity, to reveal just enough to keep us curious, never enough to satisfy. What draws us to these hidden oceans is not only the science, but something deeper. They represent a form of perfection we've lost. A world unspoiled by contact. A silence that has never been interrupted by machines or light. We long to touch them not just to understand, but to feel that purity. To reach the one place where Earth remains exactly as it was before we appeared. Perhaps that is why the thought of them feels sacred. They are the last uncorrupted places left on the planet, and the very act of seeking them risks their destruction. There is a haunting irony in that. Every probe we design, every mission we plan to reach these lakes, carries the potential to contaminate what we most wish to preserve. It is a dilemma without an answer. We cannot learn without intrusion, but we cannot intrude without loss. And so, for now, the hidden oceans remain just that, hidden. Their existence is proven, their nature unknown. They wait beneath the glaciers, beneath the drifting flows, beneath our longing to understand. They do not call to us with sound or light. They simply exist, indifferent to whether we find them or not. And perhaps that indifference is what humbles us most. Because these hidden oceans remind us that the world is not built for our discovery. It is older, deeper, and more patient than we are. It keeps its own secrets, and it keeps them perfectly. The Arctic's glaciers, in all their cold enormity, are not barriers. They are guardians. They preserve what the surface world has already forgotten. So, when we look northward, beyond the fog and the snow, we are not just chasing geography. We are chasing memory. The Earth's memory of itself. A memory written in water that moves unseen, that flows in the dark, that dreams beneath our feet like the pulse of another world. These are the hidden oceans we dream of. They exist not just beneath the ice, but within us. The unreachable places, the silent depths, the parts of ourselves that still believe in mystery. Every few decades, another expedition begins with the same conviction. This time, we will break through. Engineers build new drills, new submarines, new robotic probes designed to slip beneath the glaciers and bring back what no eye has ever seen. They are built with precision and hope, armored against cold and pressure, filled with sensors capable of reading light, temperature, magnetism, and sound. But one by one, they meet the same fate. Somewhere beneath the ice, they stop answering. Their signals weaken, distort, then vanish. What remains is a silence so deep it feels intentional, as though the Arctic itself has chosen to erase them. The history of these attempts reads like a quiet catalog of disappearance. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union sent nuclear submarines beneath the Arctic sea ice, testing how far machines could navigate under that shifting roof of frozen water. They succeeded, but only to a point. The submarines traveled through the open sea beneath the ice sheet, not through the glaciers themselves. The moment they approached the grounded ice, where glacier meets rock, their instruments failed. Sonar scattered, pressure sensors spiked, compasses spun. Even nuclear power could not overcome what the Arctic demanded. obedience to its unpredictability. Those early missions taught a simple truth that has not changed in half a century. There are places where machines can go, and places where they are not yet welcome. Later came the age of drilling. The logic seemed sound. If we could not reach the world beneath the glaciers by sea, perhaps we could descend from above. Ice cores had already revealed ancient atmospheres, each layer a time capsule of air and dust. But drilling through an entire glacier, 3 or 4 kilometers of dense, shifting ice, is a different kind of challenge. Unlike rock, ice moves. It flows and heals. A shaft drilled today can close by tomorrow. The deeper you go, the more it behaves like liquid glass, squeezing and refreezing around the drill. More than once, equipment worth millions was lost to this slow, crushing grip. Shafts filled with refrozen water. Sensors were entombed. Steel rods bent into arcs. Every expedition ends the same way, with a handful of data and a silence that feels heavier than the ice itself. To understand why, you have to imagine the conditions. Temperatures below -40. Pressure that would flatten a car. Darkness absolute. Every machine we send into that world must resist the impossible. Electronics struggle to function at those extremes. Batteries lose their charge in hours. Lubricants crystallize. Cables snap like dry twigs. Even the strongest alloys begin to change under the constant squeeze of the glacier. Metal fatigues. Plastic shatters. Circuits frost. The deeper the machine descends, the more the ice itself seems to close around it like a living thing reclaiming what was intruded upon. Engineers tried melting instead of cutting. They built hot water drills, immense systems that pump boiling water through hoses, melting a path downward. In Antarctica, this method reached depths of several kilometers, opening windows into subglacial lakes like Willans and Mercer. But even those triumphs came at a cost. The holes had to remain open long enough for instruments to be lowered, and the moment the pump stopped, the ice began to heal. Within days, the tunnels refroze. In the Arctic, where the ice is thinner but less stable, the method falters even faster. The platform itself, floating, drifting with the sea ice, moves before the drill can finish. The hole shifts off target. The hose tears. The operation ends. A year of planning vanishes into a single moment of quiet collapse. Then came the robots. Small, autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, designed to glide through water beneath the ice, mapping the unseen world with sonar and light. Some succeeded for a while. They captured brief, trembling footage of submerged cavities, of strange green plumes where meltwater met seawater. But communication was always the limit. Radio waves do not penetrate thick ice, and acoustic signals degrade quickly, distorted by density and salinity. Once the vehicle disappeared under the glacier, it was alone. It had to navigate by dead reckoning, measuring its own velocity and direction, an error-prone process that accumulates drift. A machine could think it was 500 meters away when it was actually 5 kilometers off course. When its batteries ran out, it simply stopped moving. And when it stopped moving, the ice slowly reclaimed it, folding it into the darkness forever. NASA once called the Arctic a rehearsal for space exploration, a laboratory for understanding what it would take to send probes into the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The comparison is not poetic, it's literal. The conditions beneath the glaciers mirror those of Europa or Enceladus. Pressure, darkness, isolation, cold. To send a probe, there is to face the same obstacles as sending one to another world. The difference is that, beneath our own poles, failure feels personal. We can stand above the surface and know that the machines we built Our extensions, our eyes, our instruments lie just below, entombed in silence, unreachable. Some of the most promising designs are called cryobots, cylindrical probes that melt their way through the ice using heat, trailing cables behind them for communication and power. The idea is simple, elegant, almost human in its persistence. Let the probe descend slowly, melting the ice in front while the refreezing water seals the tunnel behind. But that elegance hides a terrible vulnerability. The moment a cable breaks, the cryobot becomes a ghost. It keeps descending, unmonitored, unpowered, until the pressure crushes it or the darkness absorbs it completely. In Antarctica, a prototype cryobot once reached 2 kilometers before its tether snapped. It was never found. Its instruments may still be drifting downward, somewhere between liquid and solid, halfway between success and surrender. Each of these failures teaches something about materials, about endurance, about humility. But the Arctic keeps its lesson the same. What works elsewhere fails here. It's not that the ice hates us. It simply ignores us. It operates on a timescale our machines cannot match. We design for months. The glacier moves for millennia. We calculate stability in days. The ice rearranges itself in hours. A crevasse opens, refreezes, and opens again, faster than our computers can predict. Every success feels temporary, every failure permanent. The silence that follows these lost signals is unlike any other. When a machine fails on Mars, we can still receive its final whisper, a line of data, a frozen heartbeat, a last word. But when a machine fails under Arctic ice, there is nothing. No transmission, no echo. The darkness swallows it completely. We are left with only uncertainty, and the unsettling realization that perhaps the machine still exists down there, intact, frozen in motion, its sensors still recording data that no one will ever see. A black box without a witness. And yet, for all this futility, we keep sending more. Because somewhere between loss and discovery lies meaning. Every time we fail, we learn a little more about what the Arctic truly is. Not a frontier to be conquered, but a mirror that measures the limits of human will. The silence that follows a broken signal is not defeat. It is conversation. The ice answers not with words, but with endurance. It tells us that some knowledge must be earned slowly, and that patience, not power, is the only currency that works here. When the last light of a probe fades beneath the glacier, it doesn't vanish. It joins the world it tried to illuminate, a world that has outlasted empires, languages, and species. Down there, in the pressure and cold, the machine becomes part of the story it was meant to record. The ice closes over it, perfectly, erasing the scar. Only the faintest vibration remains, a memory trapped inside the planet's frozen skin. And so the Arctic continues, indifferent, immense, teaching through silence the one truth it seems to hold above all others, that not everything built to explore can survive what refuses to be known. Every law that governs motion, temperature, and pressure bends differently beneath the polar ice. The Arctic is not a place that disobeys physics. It is a place that perfects it. Up there, where the air sharpens into frost and the water thickens into glass, the familiar rules of the world twist into something older, purer, and far less forgiving. We think of exploration as a contest between invention and distance, between the tool and the obstacle. But under the glaciers, resistance is not a wall to be broken through. It is a language, a physics of refusal written into every molecule of frozen water. Ice is one of the strangest substances on Earth. Unlike most materials, it expands when it freezes. It floats, defying the logic of density that governs everything else. Its crystalline structure, a lattice of hydrogen bonds, creates a geometry that traps air and scatters light, producing the blue glow that seems to come from within rather than from above. But at extreme pressures, that geometry changes. The atoms rearrange into denser patterns, forming exotic phases known only to the deep. Ice 2, Ice 3, Ice V, Ice V, Ice 7. Each one heavier, darker, more rigid than the last. Beneath the glaciers, under hundreds of atmospheres of compression, water takes on forms that no surface world has ever seen. It becomes both stone and liquid, slipping between states as if it can't decide what it wants to be. This shape-shifting nature makes the ice alive in a way rock never is. It moves under gravity not as a solid mass, but as a slow, creeping fluid. Every grain shifts and flows. The glaciers deform over time, stretching, folding, breaking, healing. Fractures open and close, without warning. Cavities collapse and reform. A single degree of temperature change can alter the viscosity of the ice by a factor of 10. What seems eternal from above is, in truth, trembling with imperceptible motion. This fluidity makes it impossible to predict or model completely. A glacier is both a structure and a process. It resists by moving, by reshaping itself in response to pressure. When a probe descends, it doesn't encounter a static wall, but a shifting labyrinth. The path it melts through can seal behind it, or veer sideways, or collapse under its own refreezing weight. The deeper it goes, the slower the melt rate becomes, until heat and pressure balance perfectly and the machine stalls. In the Arctic, every descent ends in equilibrium, a quiet physics lesson about limits. And still, we study. We send sound through the ice and listen for echoes, hoping to map its hidden geometries. But sound here behaves like light in fog, bending, scattering, fragmenting. The same pressure that reshapes ice also distorts the waves that pass through it. Frequencies shift unpredictably. Echoes return as whispers, dissonant and delayed. Even seismic data, our most reliable tool, falters in this medium. Beneath the poles, physics itself becomes opaque. It isn't just the solid that resists, it's the cold. At temperatures near -50, even atoms slow their motion to a crawl. Friction changes. Resistance rises. Heat dissipates almost instantly, stolen by the ice that surrounds it. The Arctic consumes energy the way space consumes light. Every spark fades. Every current weakens. The result is a world where everything takes more power and gives less in return. What we think of as simple processes, melting, vibration, conduction, behave as though weighed down by centuries. But perhaps the most mysterious force in this frozen world is magnetism. The North Pole, after all, is not just a point on a map, but a living, wandering magnetic field. Compasses here lose meaning. The field lines twist and dip unpredictably, drawn by the iron beneath the crust and the constant convection of Earth's molten core. Over time, the magnetic pole drifts, sometimes hundreds of kilometers in a single decade. No one fully understands why. Satellites track it, but the movement seems almost willful. For explorers, this magnetic instability makes navigation beneath the ice nearly impossible. Instruments spin, maps distort, and data falters. The Arctic's invisible architecture confuses even the invisible forces we depend on. There's a kind of beauty in this. The idea that resistance itself can be graceful. The Arctic is not fighting us. It is expressing itself through the laws that made it. Each failure we experience, each shattered drill, each silenced sensor, is not an act of malice, but a consequence of precision. Nature here is perfect, not in the sense of peace, but in the sense of balance. Everything is tuned exactly to what it must be. A little colder, and the sea would freeze solid. A little warmer, and the glaciers would collapse. The Arctic endures in this narrow window, the fragile, exquisite tension between melting and permanence. That tension makes it the most responsive place on the planet. A single shift in air temperature, a slight change in ocean current, can trigger transformations across continents. When the Arctic breathes, the world's climate moves. This is the other side of its physics: influence. The same balance that keeps it frozen also makes it the planet's most sensitive organ. It is a feedback system that holds the memory of ice ages and the anticipation of future heat. Scientists have called it the thermostat of the Earth. But unlike a machine, it cannot be reset. It responds quietly and exactly to everything we do. And yet, beneath all this precision, there remains something unsolved. For decades, physicists have tried to calculate how glaciers slide across bedrock. The formula should be simple: pressure, temperature, friction. But it never adds up. The ice slips faster than expected, as if assisted by some hidden mechanism. A film of meltwater too thin to detect, or vibrations too faint to measure. Some have proposed that the movement is not mechanical at all, but acoustic. That glaciers hum themselves forward, their microscopic vibrations reducing friction like a constant song. If that is true, then even resistance has music. The Arctic is a symphony of forces we can't yet hear. Perhaps that is why this region feels so deeply mysterious. Even after centuries of study, it's not that it breaks the laws of physics, but that it reveals how fragile our understanding of them is. We are used to control, to predicting, quantifying, explaining. The Arctic resists that. It does not yield to formulas. It offers only hints, contradictions, paradoxes. It demands that we accept uncertainty as a kind of truth. In the end, the physics of resistance is not about what the ice keeps us from doing. It's about what it teaches us by saying no. We learn that matter is not static, that even stillness moves, that heat, cold, pressure, and light are not opposites, but partners in an ancient choreography. The Arctic is not defying us. It's showing us what endurance looks like when stripped of all sentiment. So when the wind howls across that white horizon and instruments begin to fail, it isn't the end of discovery. It's the beginning of comprehension. The glaciers are not walls. They are equations. They are the physical manifestation of balance itself. To push against them is to test not only the limits of our machines, but the limits of our own imagination. Maybe that's why, even as every probe vanishes and every theory falls short, we keep returning to this place. Because beneath all its indifference, the Arctic is telling us something simple and profound: that resistance is not opposition. It is the quiet proof that the world still has order, that even in chaos, the laws still hold. And perhaps that's the greatest comfort of all. In the stillness of the poles, everything obeys its nature perfectly. The ice presses, the sea sighs, the wind erases its own tracks. No rebellion, no mercy, no haste. Only the pure expression of what is. The physics of endurance written in white, unbroken silence. To imagine the Arctic as still is to misunderstand its nature. From a distance it appears frozen, locked in a permanent hush of white. But beneath that calm lies motion. Not frantic or violent, but endless and exact. Every glacier creeps forward. Every flow drifts. Every ridge fractures and reforms. The ice of the North is not a monument. It is a labyrinth that never stops moving, a living architecture built of pressure and cold. And though we have tried for centuries to chart it, no map can hold what refuses to stay still. If you stood at the edge of one of these glaciers and waited long enough, you would see it flow, not with the rush of rivers or the crash of tides, but with the gravity of continents. The ice advances meter by meter, folding on itself, splitting open, swallowing its own walls. Crevasses bloom like wounds, close like scars, and reopen somewhere else. The sound is low, almost musical, a slow grinding that vibrates through the air like breath through a throat. What seems eternal is in truth a form of perpetual change, and the longer you look, the more alive it becomes. This motion begins deep below, where pressure melts the ice into thin films of water that lubricate its base. The glacier glides over bedrock as if on hidden wheels, carving the ground into grooves and hollows. In some places the flow is steady, in others it pulses. Entire valleys inhale and exhale with the rhythm of melt and freeze, like lungs breathing through stone. The ice above rides these currents unknowingly, its movement governed by invisible rivers beneath. To walk across the Arctic is to tread upon motion itself, to stand on something that appears solid but is forever slipping away. Scientists once believed glaciers were predictable, their speeds constant over centuries. But satellite data tells another story. They surge. Some creep for decades and then suddenly accelerate, sliding kilometers in a single season before slowing again to near stillness. The cause remains unclear. A shift in temperature, a change in subglacial pressure, the draining of a hidden lake. Any of these can trigger an avalanche of motion beneath the ice, unseen but immense. It is as if the glacier, quiet for years, remembers for a moment that it is alive, then forgets again. This unpredictability makes the Arctic impossible to map with permanence. Every expedition begins with a promise of discovery and ends with the realization that the discovery has already moved. Valleys that once existed are gone. New ones appear. Ice shelves calve and reform, changing coastlines overnight. Even the Great Greenland ice sheet, vast and ancient, is in constant rearrangement. Its surface a mosaic of ridges and melt ponds that migrate like constellations. The Arctic is not a place, but a process. A choreography of mass and temperature in which everything is both leaving and arriving at once. And yet, within this chaos, there is a strange order. The geometry of impermanence. The ice flows according to patterns shaped by gravity, topography, and heat. Every crevasse follows a logic of tension. Every fracture traces the path of least resistance. It's as if the glacier is solving equations in real time. Its shifting forms the visible handwriting of physics. For those who study it, watching the Arctic move is like watching a slow, silent thought pass through the body of the planet. But for explorers and engineers, that beauty becomes an obstacle. The moment a machine is lowered into the glacier, the labyrinth begins to move around it. A tunnel drilled in winter may be lost by summer. A sensor buried one year may emerge miles away the next. Even the simplest act, taking a measurement, becomes an exercise in futility. The object you study refuses to remain what it was. The glacier reshapes itself while you observe, like a dream that changes the moment you try to describe it. This mobility also creates illusions. Radar pulses sent into the ice return echoes that shift unpredictably, as though the glacier is hiding its structure behind mirrors. Some echoes never return at all, absorbed by layers of liquid water or crystal transitions. When data is finally compiled, it reads like a map drawn from memory. Parts sharp, parts missing, everything uncertain. The Arctic's labyrinth does not simply resist intrusion. It confuses the very concept of location. Beneath its surface, direction is meaningless. Up, down, forward, back, all dissolve into movement. It is not only the ice that shifts. The ocean beneath moves too, carrying the entire frozen crust like a raft on restless water. The sea currents flow from Siberia to Canada, rotating slowly under the pole, breaking the pack ice and recombining it in new configurations. A single piece of ice that forms near the Russian coast might drift for years before melting off Greenland. The Arctic's motion is not vertical or horizontal, but total. An unbroken circulation that ties every flake to every tide. The labyrinth moves not just in space, but in time. Sometimes, though, the movement becomes violent. A glacier surges forward, tearing open as it meets the sea. Massive blocks break free and collapse into the water with a sound that can be heard for miles. A deep, resonant crack like thunder inside a cathedral. This is calving. The glacier's heartbeat made visible. Each collapse reveals layers of ancient blue, pure and luminous, like stained glass. For a moment, you glimpse what the inside of time looks like. Compressed, radiant, cold. And then the surface seals itself again, and the rhythm continues. To many who study this place, the Arctic's motion is more than physical. It feels psychological, even spiritual, as though the ice itself remembers and forgets in cycles. Each surge is a recollection, each freeze, an amnesia. We project our human metaphors onto it because it mirrors our own condition. We too live in motion, rearranging ourselves while trying to hold still. We too create labyrinths out of the paths we take, losing and finding our way through the same repeating corridors of cause and effect. Perhaps that is why the Arctic unsettles us. It behaves too much like thought and too little like matter. And yet, in its endless shifting, there is peace. The glacier's motion is not random but patient. It has no goal, no destination, no hurry. It simply flows toward balance, obeying the laws that have guided it for millions of years. What looks like instability is in truth perfect equilibrium. Movement that maintains itself by never ceasing. The labyrinth moves because motion is its way of staying whole. That realization changes something in the way we see it. The Arctic isn't resisting exploration. It's inviting humility. It reminds us that not all mysteries exist to be solved. Some exist to remind us that constancy and change are not opposites, but reflections. The ice moves, and in that movement, it endures. It loses form to preserve essence. It forgets to remember. One day, the last of these glaciers will slide into the sea. The labyrinth will dissolve, its walls collapsing into waves, its corridors flowing outward into the open ocean. But even then, its memory will remain. In the sediments it leaves behind, in the salts it releases, in the faint rise of the tides. Motion never ends. It only transforms. The labyrinth will continue in the clouds, in the rain, in the rivers that fall back to the sea, waiting for another age of cold to gather them once more. When you look at the Arctic from above, from a satellite's eye, you see that endless pulse. The ice expanding and contracting, breathing in white. The Earth itself seems to inhale and exhale through those frozen lungs. And in that slow respiration, there is a lesson so simple it feels ancient. To move is to live. To change is to remain. The Arctic knows this truth perfectly. It has practiced it for millions of years. The rest of us are only beginning to learn. Every age of the Earth has had its own Arctic, Not a fixed place, but a shifting equilibrium, a mirror of the planet's mood. There were times when the ice reached the equator, covering the world in silence, and times when it retreated, leaving only cold memories in mountain shadows. What we call the Arctic is not a constant location. It is a moving fingerprint of climate itself, a living border between heat and cold. And lately, that border has begun to tremble. For centuries, we believed the Arctic was untouchable, too vast, too remote, too perfectly balanced for human hands to disturb. The ice seemed eternal, its age measured in layers so deep that even civilizations rose and fell while it barely shifted. But that illusion has broken. The balance that once seemed divine now reveals itself as delicate. The glaciers that once crept with the patience of mountains are now retreating at the speed of rivers. The labyrinth moves faster. The gates are melting. And the question that echoes beneath every new discovery is no longer what lies below, but how much longer will it remain? When the climate warms, the Arctic responds not as a region, but as a system. The air grows humid, the sea absorbs heat, the permafrost softens, and everything that was once separate, ice, water, rock, sky, begins to merge. The polar vortex that once sealed the cold in place weakens, sending frigid air spiraling southward while warmer currents invade the pole. The cycle becomes confused. The seasons blur. Even the night loses its certainty. Where there was once a clear line between freezing and thaw, there is now a shifting gray. This transformation is not only visible from space, in satellite imagery that shows the sea ice shrinking year by year. It is audible. The Arctic used to be a world of muffled sound, where the cold thickened the air and silenced motion. Now it crackles. The ice fractures more often. Rivers of meltwater carve new channels. Storms rise over open seas that once stayed frozen all summer. The silence is breaking, replaced by a new and restless symphony. The sound of the planet rearranging itself. Each degree of warmth magnifies the change. As sunlight strikes darker water instead of bright ice, the ocean absorbs more heat, which melts more ice, which darkens the ocean further. A feedback loop that accelerates itself. What begins as a slow thaw becomes a cascade. Scientists call this the albedo effect, but it feels more like memory loss. The planet forgets how to stay cool. The reflective skin that once protected it dissolves. And beneath that skin lies a fever no one knows how to stop. And yet, there is something paradoxical here. Warming does not always mean melting. In some places, the Arctic grows wilder, colder, even heavier. Moist air from the oceans feeds massive snowfalls inland, adding weight to glaciers even as their edges dissolve. The balance of accumulation and loss becomes unpredictable. A glacier can grow and shrink at once, thickening in its heart while its boundaries disintegrate. It is a strange kind of death. The body gaining mass even as it dies. Deep below, the climate's hand reaches farther still. As ice thins, pressure lessens, and the crust begins to rise. The same slow rebound that followed the last ice age. Hidden lakes drain. Subglacial rivers find new paths. Methane sealed in frozen soil escapes into the air. Each release fuels the next, a quiet chain reaction looping back through atmosphere and ocean. The Earth is not passive in this change. It participates, amplifies, remembers. The Arctic becomes both symptom and cause, a feedback mirror through which the entire planet watches itself. But numbers, data, graphs, they tell only part of the story. The true effect is felt in the mood of the world. The light changes. The air carries new scents. The northern winds, once dry and sterile, now smell faintly of salt and thawed soil. The migratory routes of birds drift northward. Fish follow currents that never existed before. Ancient permafrost releases pollen, seeds, and the ghosts of vanished ecosystems. There are reports of prehistoric moss reviving when exposed to warmth. Spores that awaken after 40,000 years. The past, long buried, begins to breathe again. In that sense, climate change is not simply destruction. It is resurrection. The Arctic is releasing not only water, but memory. Everything the ice swallowed, forests, bones, forgotten rains, returns to the air. Carbon trapped in frozen soil becomes gas again, joining the same atmosphere it once left. The circle closes. What we call warming might just be the planet exhaling its history, one long breath after an age of stillness. But whether that breath gives life or takes it remains uncertain. The most haunting part of this transformation is its invisibility. From a distance, the Arctic still looks serene. The white remains white. The horizon still glows with that peculiar polar light. To the untrained eye, nothing has changed. But beneath that beauty, every molecule is in motion. The ice is thinning not from above, but from below. Warm ocean currents slip under the glaciers, eating them from the inside. It is a slow, invisible death, a drowning disguised as snow. There's a strange justice in it. The Arctic has always been the planet's balance point, the hinge on which all climates turn. For centuries, it absorbed our excess, reflecting heat, stabilizing winds, locking away carbon. Now, after centuries of quiet service, it is returning what we gave it. The ice releases its inheritance: warmth, gas, pressure, silence. In the end, the Arctic was never separate from us. It was always our reflection, the visible shape of our own restraint. And as that restraint melts, so does its mirror. But even as it thaws, it resists in its own way. The cold lingers deep within, unreachable by the sun. There are depths of ice that will outlive us all, layers so ancient they carry the dust of extinct stars. Even as the surface floods and the permafrost collapses, those inner strata remain frozen, not eternally, but meaningfully. They remind us that change is never total, that even within decay, there are pockets of stillness that endure. Sometimes I wonder if the Arctic feels this shift, not in a human sense, but as an organism might feel the slow alteration of its own heartbeat. The rhythm of freeze and thaw, of pressure and release, has been its pulse for millions of years. Now that rhythm stutters, the tempo quickens. Perhaps the Arctic dreams of balance the way we dream of peace, as something once known and now forgotten. We often speak of saving it, as though it were a victim waiting for rescue. But perhaps it is we who need saving, not from the ice, but from what the loss of the ice means. Because when the Arctic changes, everything else follows. The winds, the rain, the soil, the mind. The boundaries that once defined the seasons blur. The old stability, the slow rhythm that gave meaning to life, begins to unravel. The Earth is entering a new kind of time, a faster one, a more volatile one. And the Arctic is the metronome marking that shift. And yet, even in that acceleration, there is an elegance impossible to ignore. The same forces that melt the ice also create new light, new motion, new possibilities. The Arctic, even as it dies, continues to teach. It teaches impermanence. It teaches that every system, no matter how ancient, is a conversation between warmth and cold, between motion and pause. We were never outside that conversation. We were always one of its voices. The climate's hand is hidden, but not cruel. It simply reminds us that nothing on this planet stands still forever. Not the mountains, not the glaciers, not even us. The Arctic, in all its shimmering fragility, is not ending. It is evolving. It is moving into a new form, one we may not recognize, but one that will continue the story in its own language of ice and light. And somewhere beneath that changing surface, the last cold currents still flow, slow and faithful, keeping alive the rhythm of a world that once knew how to breathe in perfect balance. In the frozen silence beneath the Arctic, where sunlight has never reached and pressure weighs heavier than mountains, something moves, slowly, invisibly, purposefully. It is not the motion of ice, nor the drift of water, but the quiet persistence of life itself. Against every expectation, against every rule of biology that warmth once taught us, there are living things hidden in the darkness, carrying on the ancient work of survival in a world that never changes and yet never stops changing. They exist without color, without sound, without even the idea of day or night. And still, they endure. When scientists first drilled into the subglacial lakes of Antarctica and found living microbes in water sealed away for 500,000 years, the discovery shook everything we thought we knew about where life can thrive. The same possibility haunts the Arctic, though we have yet to reach its secret depths. If there is a life beneath the northern glaciers, in those pockets of water, in the thin veins of melt between ice and rock, then it must be unlike anything we've ever studied. It must be ancient, patient, and beyond the need for light. To live in such darkness requires a different kind of biology, one that feeds not on sunlight, but on the planet itself. These creatures, invisible to the eye, use the energy locked in minerals, in the slow decay of elements, in the faint warmth that seeps upward from the crust. They breathe iron and sulfur. They drink hydrogen. They are not fragile. They are elemental. Some may be descendants of microbes that first colonized the Earth when the atmosphere was still poison, when oceans boiled, and light was filtered through clouds of ash. If so, then beneath the Arctic, the earliest ancestors of life may still be alive, frozen in time, yet active in ways we barely comprehend. Every sample taken from deep ice cores brings whispers of their existence, traces of DNA, chemical signatures of metabolism, even microscopic fossils of cells once alive in the shadows. Under microscopes, they appear as faint smudges of structure, threads, spheres, or crystals of living geometry. Some are dormant, waiting for a change that may never come. Others move slowly even at sub-zero temperatures, their metabolism slow to a crawl, dividing once every century, or perhaps every 1,000 years. They live in rhythms too slow for us to measure, in lifetimes longer than our civilizations. It's strange to think that beneath a landscape so barren, the planet could still be growing life. The Arctic's darkness is not empty. It's fertile in its own cold way. Where pressure and time erase most forms of life, these organisms persist by becoming almost indistinguishable from their surroundings. They use the same minerals that form the ice, the same elements that shape the rock. They are both part of the environment and separate from it, like a heartbeat hiding inside a stone. To imagine them is to imagine the earth dreaming of itself. They are reminders that life's essence is not warmth or light, but persistence. That the definition of living is not expansion, but endurance. In the deep Arctic, life proves that survival is not about domination, but about blending. Adapting so perfectly that you become the very landscape that once threatened you. Some of the world's biologists refer to this as cryptobiosis, the state of almost life, a form so minimal that it borders on stillness. Tardigrades, nematodes, Even simple bacteria can enter this suspended existence, shutting down nearly every process until they are nothing more than the potential for being. In theory, such a state could last indefinitely. Some scientists believe that beneath the ice, there may be cells that have been asleep since before the last ice age, waiting not for rescue, but for balance, for the right vibration, the right molecule of warmth, to wake them. If those microbes were ever to reawaken, what would they find? The world above has changed so completely. The chemistry of oceans, the breath of air, the dance of seasons. To them, we would be the aliens, the strange, loud result of an experiment that escaped the laboratory. And perhaps, in their unknowing way, they might remember a time before us, when Earth was still raw and silent, when life moved only in darkness. There is a haunting poetry in this, that the origins of life might still exist, quietly, beneath the place we call uninhabitable. It suggests that the planet never truly forgets its beginnings, that somewhere it keeps a copy of the first spark, hidden away where heat cannot corrupt it. If so, then the Arctic is not a dead zone, but a memory vault, a living archive of the planet's first dream. What fascinates scientists most is what this could mean for life beyond Earth. The frozen moons of Jupiter and Saturn, Europa, Enceladus, Titan, all possess ice crusts and dark oceans beneath them. We send probes there, searching for signs of the same chemistry that sustains life here. If we ever find life elsewhere, it may look not like forest or creatures, but like the microbes beneath the Arctic, silent, patient, unseen. In that way, every attempt to understand this frozen darkness is also a rehearsal for meeting the universe. The Arctic becomes our mirror, teaching us that life does not need sunlight to exist, only persistence and the faintest trace of energy. But there is also something unsettling about this realization. If life can exist in such deep isolation, does it ever die? Or does it simply wait? A cell frozen in the dark could, in theory, survive indefinitely. Its molecules preserved perfectly, its potential paused. Some scientists have revived bacteria from permafrost tens of thousands of years old, still capable of dividing once exposed to warmth. Each revival blurs the boundary between life and memory, between present and prehistory. It reminds us that extinction might be less permanent than we thought, that the planet holds its dead in storage, waiting for the right conditions to call them back. And not all resurrections are harmless. As permafrost thaws, viruses long sealed in ice may return to a world that has forgotten how to resist them. The Arctic silence could become a whisper of warning, not from the future, but from the past. A reminder that the boundaries between what is gone and what remains are as thin as the crust of ice beneath our feet. Still, I can't help but feel a kind of awe at the thought of these creatures existing below us, indifferent to our warmth and noise. Their world is pure endurance, their purpose simple: to continue. Perhaps they do not even perceive time the way we do. Perhaps for them, 1,000 years is a heartbeat, an eternity just a longer pause between moments of motion. In that perspective, our entire history becomes a blink. Our empires, our discoveries, our fears, all fleeting compared to the slow persistence of a microbe trapped beneath miles of ice. The whisper of life in the dark is not loud. It does not announce itself in color or form. It exists as vibration, as chemistry, as an almost music too quiet for our ears. But if you listen closely, through the instruments and data, through the hum of the planet's coldest regions, you can almost hear it. The murmur of life refusing to vanish. the sound of being continuing beneath all endings. And maybe that is what the Arctic has been trying to tell us all along. That life is not the opposite of death, but its reflection. That survival does not require sunlight, only patience. That in the deepest dark, the smallest spark is enough to keep the universe alive. The glaciers are not tombs. They are wombs of time, carrying the memory of the first heartbeat forward, unbroken, eternal. The whisper of life still echoes there, too faint for language, too ancient for fear. It asks nothing. It promises nothing. It simply is. And that, perhaps, is the most sacred truth of all. When you stare into the Arctic's endless white, it's easy to forget you're looking at a mirror, not of the sky above, but of worlds beyond. Frozen moons circling distant planets, each one cloaked in its own layer of silence and ice. The North Pole is not just a place on Earth. It is a reflection of the universe's cold architecture, a rehearsal for the infinite. Everything we find here, the pressure, the darkness, the hidden oceans, the whisper of unseen life, exists elsewhere, far away, under alien suns. The Arctic, in its stillness, shows us what the cosmos looks like when stripped of illusion. It begins with Europa. Beneath its cracked shell of ice, Jupiter's moon hides an ocean deeper than all of Earth's combined. We know it's there because of the way the moon's surface flexes and trembles under Jupiter's gravity, as if the crust were breathing. That ocean may have hydrothermal vents on its floor, releasing heat and minerals just as our own deep seas do. It may be warm enough to host life, yet sealed away beneath kilometers of frozen water. A planetary version of the Arctic, multiplied 100-fold. Every time we drill into our own glaciers, we're peering into Europa's heart by proxy. Every subglacial lake, every surviving microbe, is a model for what might drift unseen beneath that alien ice. Saturn has its own mirror in Enceladus, a smaller moon, brighter than snow, shining like a bead of frost in the dark. Its surface cracks constantly, and from those cracks, geysers erupt, spraying plumes of water vapor and organic compounds into space. We have flown spacecraft through those plumes, tasting them, analyzing their chemistry, and what we found there is strangely familiar. The same salts, the same carbon-based molecules, the same building blocks that underlie every cell on Earth. Enceladus, too, has a hidden ocean, sealed beneath its crust. If life exists there, it might resemble what sleeps under our own poles. Slow, chemical, patient. And then there is Titan, Saturn's largest moon, wrapped in a golden haze, with lakes and rivers not of water, but of methane and ethane. It's too cold for liquid water to exist on its surface, but beneath that frozen crust may lie a subsurface ocean as well. The pattern repeats: darkness, pressure, isolation, potential. It's as if the conditions that create life, or preserve it, are not rare accidents, but universal habits. Perhaps every world that breathes has its own Arctic, its own hidden cold heart that keeps the memory of creation alive. When scientists study the Arctic, they are not merely exploring our planet. They are testing the physics of existence itself. The cryobots we designed to melt through our glaciers will one day be sent to Europa. The sonar that maps our subglacial rivers will echo through Enceladus's crust. Even the microbes we study in frozen soil become ambassadors, showing us what to expect when we finally meet life that has never seen the sun. The Arctic is our laboratory for the stars, a training ground for humility. But beyond science lies something deeper, something almost spiritual. These distant reflections remind us that Earth is not unique. We are not the exception. We are the continuation. The same chemistry that shaped us moves silently beneath alien skies. The same physics that freezes our seas holds the oceans of other worlds in place. The Arctic, in all its desolation, is a bridge between planets, proof that life and silence are not opposites, but partners in the same vast equation. There's a strange comfort in knowing that somewhere, billions of miles away, another ocean exists under ice, breathing in rhythm with ours. Perhaps it, too, has its own whisper of life, a microbial dream drifting in darkness, waiting for a spark, a tremor, a warmth. Perhaps that life wanders in whatever way it can, if it is alone. And maybe, unknowingly, we are already answering it, through every pulse of sonar we send into our own glaciers, through every light we shine into the Arctic abyss. Two silences, speaking across the void. This mirroring is not just physical, it's emotional. To gaze into the Arctic is to experience the same awe and smallness we feel when we look up at the stars. The same realization unfolds, that our planet is fragile, that our knowledge is partial, that we are surrounded by immensities we can barely name. The Arctic is the cosmos turned inward, the night sky reflected downward through layers of frozen light. Its blue depths are the color of distance, of things just beyond reach. In the 19th century, before telescopes could see far into space, polar explorers described their journeys in almost cosmic language. They spoke of sailing into infinity, of standing on the edge of the known world, of staring into horizons that refuse to end. For them, the Arctic was a physical version of eternity, a place that stretched thought itself. That feeling has not changed. Modern scientists, surrounded by instruments and data, still speak of awe, of wonder, of a quiet terror that seeps in when they realize how small their presence is compared to the scale of what surrounds them. The ice, like space, erases the individual and leaves only the question. What is this all for? The deeper connection between the Arctic and outer worlds is not temperature or geography, but time. Both preserve it. In ice and in space, time moves differently. Stretched, slowed, folded. A glacier preserves air from 10,000 years ago. A comet carries dust from before the sun was born. When we explore the Arctic, we're not just moving north. We're moving backward, closer to the beginning. The ice becomes a kind of telescope, one that looks inward instead of outward, showing us the deep time of our own planet. And perhaps that is why we keep returning to it, even when it resists us. The Arctic gives us a way to experience infinity without leaving home. It teaches us what it feels like to exist in the margins of what's knowable, to live inside a question rather than an answer. When you stand on the ice under a clear sky, the stars above and the frozen world below feel like the same surface, folded around you. There is no up or down, only the hum of the universe echoing through water and vacuum alike. If you close your eyes there, you might even feel it. The slow alignment of everything. The glacier beneath your feet. The moonlight on your face. The magnetic pull of the poles. The spin of the planet itself. In that moment, the distance between worlds disappears. The Arctic becomes Europa. The ocean beneath becomes Enceladus. You become the echo of something vast and unending, something that connects every frozen place in the cosmos. Maybe that's the final revelation of this mirror, that the universe is not elsewhere. It's here, under our feet, in the layers of ice and pressure that hold our planet's memory. The Arctic is our closest window into the logic of creation, not because it shows us something new, but because it reminds us that everything, from starlight to seawater, obeys the same quiet law. persistence, even in darkness, especially in darkness. And so, when we look up at the night sky, we are not looking outward. We are looking homeward, reflected through ice. The cosmos is beneath us as much as above us. Every frozen ocean, every drifting flake, every buried microbe is a fragment of the same great conversation between matter and meaning. The Arctic answers the stars not with words, but with the same calm truth, that life, in all its forms, is patient, that silence is not emptiness, that what endures does so by remaining unseen. The poles of this planet are not boundaries, they are mirrors, and through them, the universe remembers its own face. There's a quiet unease that lingers beneath every expedition, a question we rarely speak aloud. Just because we can reach a place, should we? Curiosity has always been humanity's oldest flame, the fire that warms and burns in equal measure. It built our cities, wrote our sciences, sent us into space. But it also made us careless with the sanctuaries of the Earth. The Arctic is one of those sanctuaries, an untouched cathedral of cold that still hums with the planet's first silence. And now, as our tools sharpen and our ambitions deepen, that silence is beginning to fracture under the weight of our wanting. To explore the Arctic's underworld, we must pierce what has remained sealed for millions of years. We drill, we melt, we listen. We send machines into depths that have never known light. Each act is small, justified by science, by knowledge, by progress. Yet beneath those justifications lies an older impulse, the desire to uncover, to possess, to turn the unknowable into the known. We tell ourselves we do it for understanding, but perhaps we do it for reassurance, to prove that no mystery is beyond us. And in that need, something sacred begins to tremble. The ice beneath the North Pole is not simply a frozen archive. It is a living boundary, one that protects worlds within worlds, microbial ecosystems, ancient atmospheres, geological memories. To open it is to change it. Every borehole we melt, every sensor we lower, introduces the possibility of contamination. One drop of modern bacteria could rewrite the biology of a lake that has been sealed since before human language existed. 1 degree of warmth could awaken gases trapped for epochs, altering balance in ways no model can predict. Exploration is never neutral. It leaves fingerprints. Even our purest intentions leave scars. It's easy to forget that our science, for all its sophistication, is still young compared to what it seeks to measure. The Arctic has existed in silence for more than 2 million years. Our instruments have existed for less than 200. We arrive with machines of steel and light, confident in their precision. But the ice does not measure time that way. It understands patience, not progress. It doesn't answer quickly, or at all. Perhaps that is why our curiosity feels, at times, like intrusion, because it moves too fast for the rhythm of the world it enters. In 2012, when scientists drilled into Antarctica's Lake Vostok, they did so after decades of preparation and debate. They found microbial life, yes, but also something unexpected, a profound unease. The act of breaching that ancient water felt, even to its explorers, like crossing a moral line. They realized that they had not just opened a lake, they had opened a time capsule. The decision to look was irreversible. That realization echoes through every new Arctic proposal, every planned descent into subglacial waters. We can do it. But what do we awaken when we do? Perhaps the Arctic's greatest lesson is not scientific but ethical. It forces us to confront the cost of knowing. In an age where discovery is worshipped, where every mystery must be solved and shared, The Arctic remains a reminder that ignorance, in its truest, humblest sense, has value. Not all knowledge brings harmony. Some knowledge takes. Some cannot be possessed without loss. The Arctic resists because resistance itself is a form of protection. It keeps the balance by keeping us out. The scientists who study it know this conflict intimately. They speak of awe and restraint in the same breath. Some say they feel as though they are trespassing in a dream. Others compare it to archaeology in a sacred temple. Every step measured, every word whispered. In their notebooks, you find phrases that sound almost devotional. We must move slowly. We must not wake it too soon. The ice remembers. They are not being poetic. They are describing an emotional truth that data can express. When faced with something that has existed unchanged since long before our kind, curiosity becomes reverence. But reverence is fragile. It competes with ambition, with funding, with the unstoppable momentum of progress. Governments and corporations see in the Arctic not mystery, but resource. Beneath the ice lie oil, gas, rare minerals, the building blocks of our modern hunger. As the climate warms and the ice recedes, the temptation grows. The same melting that opens scientific opportunity also opens commercial appetite. Drilling rigs replace research stations. Shipping lanes cut through what was once impassable. The noise of engines fills the silence that once defined this place. And with each intrusion, the Arctic becomes a little less untouchable. To stand against that tide is difficult. Wonder alone cannot preserve what profit seeks to claim. Yet perhaps wonder can remind us why it matters. The Arctic does not belong to us, but it sustains us. Its reflection of sunlight cools the planet. Its frozen winds shape our weather. To disturb it too deeply is to disturb ourselves. In this way, the ethics of curiosity are not about restraint for the Arctic's sake, but for our own survival. The line between knowing and consuming has never been thinner, and yet, even in this tension, there is grace. Some of the most meaningful discoveries in polar research have come not from drilling deeper or digging harder, but from listening, from patience, observation, stillness. Instruments left to rest on the ice record vibrations, whispers, harmonics. They reveal patterns we could never force by intrusion. The natural breathing of the glaciers, the soft hum of meltwater beneath, the slow turning of the planet through magnetic fields. Knowledge can come from reverence as much as from conquest. The Arctic teaches us that to understand something truly, we must let it remain partly unknown. Maybe the deeper question is not whether we should explore, but how we define exploration at all. Must it always mean penetration, extraction, illumination? Or can it mean attention, respect, conversation? Perhaps real exploration begins not when we drill, but when we listen. When we allow the mystery to exist beside us without the need to dissect it. The Arctic's greatest defense has always been its silence. Perhaps our greatest act of discovery would be to preserve that silence, to learn its language instead of breaking it. If there is an ethics to curiosity, it must include humility, to accept that the world is larger than our understanding, that some truths do not need to be owned. We are guests here, brief and clumsy, surrounded by systems that took millions of years to form. The glaciers, the microbes, the dark oceans, they owe us nothing. Our desire to know them does not grant us permission to change them. One day, we may finally build a machine capable of surviving the Arctic's depths. It will descend beneath the ice, sending back images of a world untouched. We will watch, awestruck, as the camera drifts through darkness and light. But even then, even in that moment of triumph, the deeper question will remain. What did we trade for this vision? What silence did we disturb to bring back this knowledge? Perhaps the answer will come not from what the machine sees, but from what it cannot. From the quiet that follows when it powers down. From the awareness that every act of illumination also casts a shadow. The Arctic's final lesson may be this: that mystery is not our enemy, but our balance. Without it, we lose our measure. Without it, we forget that to know the world is not to own it. The ice, after all, does not hide out of malice. It hides to preserve the rhythm of things. It conceals not to taunt us, but to teach us patience, to remind us that even curiosity must learn to kneel. There comes a moment, near the end of every journey north, when the horizon disappears. The air turns so clear, so empty of color, that it's impossible to tell where the world ends and the sky begins. You stand surrounded by a light that isn't brightness, a silence that isn't quiet. Everything dissolves into one continuous stillness. It is here, in this space beyond edges, that the Arctic begins to reveal its truest self, not as a destination, not even as a mystery to be solved, but as a mirror held up to the human condition. We came here seeking knowledge, but what we find instead is reflection. Every expedition that has reached this point, every scientist, every explorer has reported the same sensation, that the world above the ice feels less real than the world beneath it, as if what lies below, the rivers, the darkness, the buried oceans, were more truthful, more permanent, more essential. We build instruments, send drones, analyze samples, yet what returns to us always carries an echo of something we can't quantify. Reverence. It is the realization that there are some places where knowledge ends and meaning begins. The Arctic, in all its unreachability, exists to remind us of that boundary. It resists not because it is cruel, but because resistance is its nature. The way the world keeps a fragment of itself untouched. Beneath its glaciers lies not only pressure and darkness, but something rarer. Continuity. A place that has existed almost unchanged since the dawn of our species, enduring everything that has come and gone. In its cold silence, the planet remembers itself, and maybe that's why we keep returning. Because on some level, we long to touch that memory. To feel, even for a moment, what it means to belong to something older than history. We live in a world of noise, of heat, of movement, where every secret is exposed and every boundary crossed. But under the polar ice, there is still one place where the ancient rhythm continues undisturbed. It's not waiting for us. It doesn't even notice us. And yet, we orbit around it as if it were the heart of the Earth. Perhaps it is. The more we learn, the more the Arctic seems to teach through absence. We find data, yes, layers of isotope ratios, records of temperature and carbon trapped in air bubbles. But these numbers are only the grammar of a larger silence. The real message lies between them. It is the understanding that mystery itself is not an obstacle to truth, but part of it. What we cannot measure still holds value. What we cannot see still defines what is visible. The Arctic endures to protect this principle, to prove that not all meaning depends on light. If the glaciers were to melt completely, we would lose more than ice. We would lose a way of seeing, the perspective that comes from humility. When everything can be known, the sacred disappears. The Arctic is sacred not because it hides miracles, but because it hides at all. It gives us something we can't possess, an edge that will not yield. In that resistance lies balance. The Earth needs its unknowns as much as it needs its seasons. Without them, the system collapses inward under the weight of its own clarity. You can feel this truth in the air there. The cold is not simply temperature, it's presence. It presses against the skin like a reminder of boundaries, the limit of flesh, of endurance, of time. Every breath is a negotiation between body and world. Each step across the ice is a small act of faith. The Arctic is not trying to kill us. It is trying to keep its own laws intact. It asks nothing but respect, and in return, it offers a kind of honesty we rarely encounter elsewhere. Here, everything is stripped bare. There is no illusion of control, no distraction of abundance. Only what is. Perhaps that is why the silence feels alive. At times, it hums faintly, as if carrying voices from deep below. The sound of distant cracking, of pressure shifting, of the earth turning in its sleep. You stand there and realize, this place is not still. It's just slow. Its heartbeat measures in centuries. Its breath lasts millennia. And one day, long after our empires fade, it will continue breathing exactly the same. Some scientists speak of a coming ice-free Arctic, a summer when the polar seas will melt entirely, when ships will pass through waters that have never seen open sky. It's spoken of as progress, as possibility. But what disappears with the ice is not just a landscape. It's a kind of wisdom. When the last floe melts, the last reflection vanishes too. The mirror breaks. We will still see the sky, yes, but no longer see ourselves in it. The Arctic's mystery was never about what it hides, but about what it holds in balance. The delicate equilibrium between knowing and not knowing, between seeking and surrender. Every glacier, every unseen valley beneath the ice is part of a system that depends on restraint. We are part of it too, whether we admit it or not. To forget that is to become deaf to the planet's own language. If the Arctic could speak, if the ice could translate its weight into words, it might say something simple. You were never meant to see everything. It might remind us that wonder dies in captivity, that knowledge without reverence becomes consumption, that the deepest truths must remain half hidden, or they lose their shape. And maybe that's why, even after centuries of exploration, the North still feels unfinished. Every map leaves a blank, every theory an unanswered question. The Arctic resists closure the way silence resists sound, not from fear, but from necessity. In that refusal lies a strange mercy. It spares us from our own certainty. There is an old belief, whispered by the Inuit elders, that the ice listens, that it remembers the voices of those who walk upon it, carrying them down through the layers to be preserved forever. If that's true, then the Arctic has been collecting humanity's breath for centuries. Explorers, scientists, wanderers, all whispering the same prayer into the wind. Let me see. Perhaps the ice keeps those words, not as a request, but as a warning. Because to see everything is to lose the beauty of not knowing, as I imagine it now. That endless field of white stretching into horizonless distance. I think of how strange it is that our species measures success by conquest. The Arctic offers another definition. Here, to endure is to yield. To know is to accept mystery. To survive is to respect the limits of touch. And maybe that's the only way to love this planet. Not by claiming its secrets, but by standing quietly at the threshold and listening to what will never be said aloud. Because beneath the glaciers, beneath the silence and the dark, beneath even our longing to understand, something waits. Not for us, but for itself. The pulse of the earth. The first breath of creation. still echoing through ice. It is a mystery that must remain, and in its endurance, it keeps us human.